The Realme X2 Pro was arguably the best phone of 2019, and for some, still the best of 2020, though its time to shine was cut pretty short by just 4 to 5 months due to its successor, the Realme X50 Pro. That's what we're unboxing today, and that's what I'll be reviewing and comparing thoroughly against the X2 Pro. I have the 8GB of RAM, 128GB version in moss green. There are the prices in the top right hand corner if you'd like to check them out. It comes paired with this terrible silicone case, pretty much the exact same one that comes with the X2 Pro, so I'd scrap that and get a new one if you must have a case. We get a USB Type-C to Type-A ports over here for the charging capabilities. Unfortunately, only USB 2.0 speeds. We have a 65-watt Super Dart charge over here. They've changed the name from Super VOOC to Super Dart, and even though the previous one was only 50 watts, they've kept pretty much the same form factor. I think that the phone looks absolutely stunning in this moss green. I really like the frosted glass look at the back. I think it looks a lot better than the glossy globe finish at the back of the Realme X2 Pro. Also like that they've rechanged the position of the logo, and I like that it doesn't reflect too much light off of it, but still gives it a bit of a shimmer. They're so classy, throw on those covers and they look so terrible. I really do suggest leaving a cover off or grabbing a hard shell case. Even though this frosted glass looks stunning, it still picks up fingerprints. I'm really glad to see that they've changed the positioning of the branding. It looked absolutely terrible on the X2 Pro. We have the indented power buttons on both phones and split volume rockers on both phones left hand side. The top it is nice and clean on both devices here too, and at the bottom the one thing you'll see the X2 Pro has that the X50 Pro does not have is the headphone jack, and that's a big deal if you ask me. We have a downward firing speaker and we have our earpieces there which rock up as a second firing speaker on both devices. We have a dual SIM card slot on both phones, but unfortunately no space for micro SD this time round, as the X2 Pro didn't have this either. The X50 Pro is slightly shorter, slightly narrower, and slightly thicker, but it has a bit of a smaller camera bump compared to the X2 Pro, meaning that the rocking effect on a table with no cover on is a hell of a lot better than the rocking effect of the X2 Pro. That's always good to see. That wonderful 6.44-inch AMOLED screen looks absolutely insanely gorgeous, I must say. I really do dig the punch hole at the top over there, and it is not curved, it's nice and flat. Many of you guys do prefer that. That punch hole is really massive though, that pull shape with the two cameras. We'll get to cameras later, but I honestly think they would have done a better job just with a single punch hole over there, or none at all, and maybe even a pop-up. Anyway, both phones look great when you are looking at the colors, and I do have the Realme X2 Pro on the latest Android 10 Realme UI skin, so that's really good to see. That's why we have these wonderful live wallpapers. They both have 90Hz refresh rate panels, and they're both just as fluid. Bear in mind that the Realme X2 Pro actually comes with a 6.5-inch display as opposed to the smaller 6.44-inch on the X50 Pro. We're going to start here with a charging test before anything else, because I want to get the phones up to 100 so that we can test out battery drain throughout the test when we'll go between benchmarks, software, and camera samples. We're going to start here from 50% on both phones. There are the temperatures at the top as well as their milliamps in battery. Both of them are dual cell batteries, meaning that there are two similar batteries in each phone. So 2100 milliamps and 2100 milliamps, two of those cells in the X50 Pro, and two 2000 milliamp hour cells in the X2 Pro. We have 50 watts on the X2 Pro and 65 watts on the X50 Pro, but because we have a slightly smaller battery in the X2 Pro, not much smaller I must add, 100% in just 15 minutes, or 14 minutes and 40 seconds. That is really great time for 50%, and honestly most of the time you're only really going to be charging your phone in the last 50%, not so much the first 50%. That's 3.4% per minute on the X2 Pro, and 138 milliamps per minute on the X2 Pro as well, as opposed to the X50 Pro which finished in 20 minutes, almost 6 minutes later, 2.5% per minute, and 105 milliamps per minute over there. Definitely slower charging than the X2 Pro, even though it has a faster charging block. Now we're going to go ahead and enable all the highest possible performance modes that we can add on both of these devices, running the exact same skin over here before we get onto software. We are both rocking Realme UI over here, the latest Android 10 skin on both phones. I'm really glad that it has come to the X2 Pro. Once again, adding it a point in my system over here for why I think that you guys should rather pick up the X2 Pro, but we'll get to that in a little bit later. We have dark mode over here, and we can use them in pretty much all system apps. The cool thing is that we can use it for third-party apps as well on both devices. Of course, we're running the same software, so there are no issues running dark mode across all other apps here too. Now, Google Chrome looks great in third-party apps, but other apps such as Astral VPN makes the colors of the text look a bit strange. We also have screen off clocks, which they've improved a lot since the previous Color OS on the Realme devices. They look really great and they're really bright as well, though there is no way of adjusting the brightness, but they do stay on all the time. We also have navigation gestures on both phones here, which is great to see. We can swipe in from the left and right of the screen, or we can swipe at the bottom right hand corner or left hand corner like you see on the Samsung devices, which is something that I do prefer. You can also seamlessly change between apps by pulling in from the left and right of the screen. That is something that we see in MIUI. We also have wonderful optical fingerprint sensors on both of them. They are pretty much exactly the same sensors, and that is why you don't see much of a difference over here. I think though that you do see a little bit more of an animation on the Realme X2 Pro with the fingerprint sensor, so that makes the Realme X50 Pro seem a little bit faster. Same thing can be said when unlocking with your face. There is a little bit of an animation speed with the Realme X2 Pro. It is slightly faster on the X50 Pro. So we've dropped 3% on the X50 Pro and 5% on the Realme X2 Pro since we did that charge test. We have a Snapdragon 865 processing chip in the Realme X50 Pro and an 855 Plus chip in the Realme X2 Pro for this AnTuTu Benchmark run. There are the temperatures for the battery, and here are the temperatures for the CPU. We're also going to be testing out battery drain at the end of the test, so stick around till the end of the test, the end of this AnTuTu Benchmark run, before we head over to the pictures department, video department, and the conclusion of the video. Right now, we're sitting on hotter battery temps on the X50 Pro as opposed to the X2 Pro, and we're sitting on cooler CPU temps on the X50 Pro as opposed to the X2 Pro. Though remember that we do have 7nm plus technology on the X50 Pro and 7nm technology on the X2 Pro, meaning that the CPU technology is slightly cooler, slightly more efficient on the new X50 Pro, meaning that it should be quite a bit cooler, though in this case only 2 degrees cooler at start. Let's see what happens at the end of the test. The 90Hz panels look pretty great on both phones. We're going to speed things up here and get to the results. So when it comes to a battery drain, they both drained by 5%, meaning that the X2 Pro actually did a better job since it has a smaller battery. The X2 Pro added less battery temperatures in degrees Celsius as opposed to the X50 Pro, but it was hotter and gained a lot more in the CPU degrees section over there, adding 2 more degrees as opposed to the X50 Pro. The X50 Pro is 16.3% better than the X2 Pro over there, so it's not a massive difference. It's not something that you will notice in games, and it won't really affect that wonderful 90Hz panel either. We have just 2% behind on the X2 Pro as opposed to the X50 Pro when it comes to battery drain so far. And in the camera department, they both have 64 megapixel GW1 f.18 main sensors. They both have telephoto lenses, though the X2 Pro has 1 more megapixel there. They both have ultra wide lenses, the same 8 megapixels, and they both have 2 megapixel depth sensors. We went straight from the ultra wide to the main over here to the binned pick, and honestly the X50 Pro, all you can really see is a slight more color refinement there. Otherwise, the details are pretty similar on both phones since they're using such similar cameras, and going from bin to macro mode, you can see that the X50 Pro has really stepped things up when using macro mode. Stepping outside though, things are slightly different. The colors are a lot more accurate on the X50 Pro, and I do think that the overall look of the pictures on the X50 Pro is quite a bit better and more realistic than the X2 Pro. As soon as we go into zoom there, we have 5x optical hybrid on the X50 Pro, just hybrid on the X2 Pro. 20x zoom, things definitely look slightly more clear, but sometimes a little bit grainy on the X50 Pro. Strange thing is that there is no 4K 60 frames per second option on the X50 Pro, so we're limited to 30 frames per second there, where its predecessor, the X2 Pro, actually does have a 60 frames per second option, and you see it guys, it looks a hell of a lot better on the X2 Pro. Once again, we both have 1080p at 60 frames per second on both phones. A lot more stabilized now in the X50 Pro since we have 60 frames per second there. Ultra wide, both of them are limited to 1080p and both of them are limited to 30 frames per second, which kind of sucks since most phones these days can do 4K at 30 frames per second, such as the likes of the Samsung Galaxy S20. We have ultra steady mode on both of them. They're both off right now with me running on the bridge here. Now I'm going to go running again. Nothing is really changing on the X2 Pro, but they have really stepped up the game here with the X50 Pro. Ultra Steady is a game changer. Selfie cams, we have a 32 megapixel selfie snap on the X50 Pro and an 8 megapixel ultra wide. On the X2 Pro, we just have a single teardrop notch style selfie snapper of just 16 megapixels. Let's have a look if that second one just makes the screen look ugly or if it actually does a good job. That 32 megapixel does look better on the X50 Pro, I must add, but as soon as we switch to ultra wide, it looks terrible. Stick to one camera, Realme. Let's go on to video.
What's up guys, this is Technic recording a 1080p at 30 frames per second video on the Realme X50 Pro. Let me know what you guys think of the audio and video quality of the X50 Pro. What's up guys, this is Technic recording a 1080p at 30 frames per second video on the Realme X2 Pro. Let me know what you guys think of the video and audio quality of the X2 Pro.
The interesting thing with the X50 Pro is that you actually get ultra steady on the selfie cam, and it actually works. That's really cool. Good on you, Realme. Battery drain guys, after an hour and 19 15 minutes. The X50 Pro drained by 17% as opposed to 21% on the X2 Pro. The X50 Pro dropped by 0.22% per minute as opposed to the X2 Pro's 0.27% per minute. The Realme X50 Pro is definitely the best, cheapest, budget-friendly powerhouse phone of 2020 so far. It is the cheapest 5G flagship phone on the market and has a lot to offer when it comes to specs. But if 5G is not your forte or it's not available in your country and you don't need a 16% performance improvement, then save your money and go for the X2 Pro. But those are just my thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. So far, the X2 Pro still has that spot in my heart. Guys, this is Technic, and I'll see you in the next one.